Have you ever wondered if there's something that you're just missing out on that would be the key to unlocking health and healing and happiness in your relationships? Have you ever felt like you're just circling the drain with some patterns in your life that just keep repeating and repeating no matter what you do, no matter where you go to therapy or what workshops or books you read? Well, in my opinion, there is one thing that we absolutely cannot afford to not understand in terms of a healing approach to all of our relationships, and that is internal family systems. My name is Amy Rose White. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. This channel is all about psychospiritual self-healing tools. So, what is internal family systems? You've probably heard a lot about it, seen its popularization, or heard about something called parts work, which is essentially the same. It really comes out of the inner child work of the 80s, ego state therapy, other things that a lot of us have training on. But Richard Schwartz, who pioneered internal family systems through his work with people with eating disorders over the last 3 decades, has really created a beautiful, elegant, and dynamic way that any of us, layperson or therapist, can use to dramatically improve our relationships and truly, truly stop some of the patterns that we find sabotage those partnerships and dynamics in all areas of our life. Internal family systems is based on the idea that we have a core self that is timeless, that is essentially unity consciousness or the energy of love. That's how I consider it. Some might call it the soul, Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, self with a capital S is how we write it and think about it and say it in internal family systems. But that core, calm, centered essence of who we are, it's not a part, it's the core, I would say, energetic flow from source, from the divine. It's really representative of our connection to what is greater than us. It's our core connection to the divine. And you know it when you meet a baby for the first time, as I discussed in my last video, and you're just filled with the energy of love. You see that child as love because it just is. It's not hard to connect to the goodness and beauty and wonder and joy that's in an infant. And essentially, an infant, because they've literally gone through this passage between life and death, is connected to that divine spark. They are really embodied before they get all this conditioning about how they should look and how they should act, and are they too tall or too short, or what they should do and how much money they should make. Like, all that conditioning that comes on is just kind of obfuscating the true nature, not only of reality, but who we are as human beings, which, as I've said, and many have before me, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And internal family systems helps us re-access the core essence of who we are. Aside from the self with the capital S, we have parts that essentially fall into two categories: protectors and exiles. Exiles can also be understood as unconscious material, or what Jung called the shadow. Shadow material is not bad. It's not necessarily dark, evil, demonic, mean, angry, or negative in any way, but it is out of our consciousness. It is hidden material. And it is hidden for a really good reason, because exile parts are experiences that are emotionally too overwhelming to digest when we're young children. Typically, that's where they begin. So, for example, if we bring a beautiful picture we've made to one of our parents and they criticize it and point out what's wrong with it, and we're 4 years old or 7 years old or however old, and we just had fun putting color on the page, but we're told that, you could do better, or, well, your sister made something else much prettier, or why do you spend your time doing that? You should be learning the alphabet, or, any kind of misattuned response that brings up a feeling of rejection. That feeling of rejection, disapproval, not belonging, not being cherished, adored, seen as special, that need is so deep as human beings that a young child will actually interpret that rejection as a threat to survival. And that survival threat feels way too psychically overwhelming to the young mind. We don't have a way without co-regulation to manage really big feelings. So many of us have really natural emotional responses when we're little, but we basically have them alone. And one of the ways that IFS is so healing is it repairs that pattern. When the exiled material eventually comes up, and we'll talk about how we get there in a second, that core consciousness of self comes to be with that material once again. So it gets to be processed completely, but not in isolation and aloneness. And that offers us profound healing. One of the reasons that exile material is so hard to access is that it is being protected. And that's the third primary component in internal family systems work, is we have these subpersonalities that are either exiled material or protectors, because the protectors say, okay, that was too much. We can't handle that on our own. We don't know how to process that. That feels like it might overwhelm or even kill us. So we will bring in thoughts, beliefs, patterns of behavior, and ways of showing up in the world that make sure you don't have to feel that pain. That's essentially what protectors do. So protectors can act as people pleasers, perfectionists. They can push people away from relationships. They can make you obsessed about the size your body is or the wrinkles that you have. They basically seek to feel in control so that you feel safe. And in a preferred role, they are really useful. We are not in any way ever trying to get rid of any of our parts. Let me be very clear on that. Those parts can also help us get up in the morning, get to work on time, pay our bills, be a good friend, show up for a neighbor and make them a meal when they're sick. Protective parts just keep our life going when they're in preferred roles. But the reason why we can't afford to not understand internal family systems is that most of us have parts that go to extreme roles or less preferred roles that show up in our relationships when we are obsessively jealous or defensive or criticizing our partner all the time, or we keep all our relationships really surface level because we're afraid of being seen and rejected and we can't get intimate. So protectors can run the gamut from very helpful in their preferred roles all the way, honestly, to even engaging in homicidal behavior. One of the reasons IFS is such a beautiful framework is that it's completely non-pathologizing, even to people that are engaging in really horrific stuff behavior-wise, because we simply see that that's a part that, in earlier days of IFS, we call firefighters, and some people still use that language. It's a part that is dealing with overwhelming emotion and doesn't have in that moment any other strategy other than something very primitive, like lashing out, self-harm, suicidal ideation, or even harming other people. So if we can understand that we are a sum of a bunch of parts that are just trying sometimes to work together, sometimes they're not, but with IFS, slowly but surely they learn to work together, this internal family, then they can move into more preferred roles that actually serve us, that make us vulnerable with the right people. They can move into roles where they help us select and differentiate what friends are actually safe, who's really going to show up for us, who can we rely on. And when no one shows up, people, fail all the time, or they're just simply not around. The internal family systems model gives us practice with reconnecting to that capital S self, with finding the availability, the eternal availability of soul, higher consciousness, higher self, love, compassion, clarity, courage. Those are some of the core essences of that capital S self and who we are. When we're able over time to practice over and over again, bringing curiosity to the parts, they begin to trust that eternal sense of who we really are is actually the one that's there to take care of them now. And when that trust is built, they begin willing, those protective parts, to step aside just enough to give us access to some of those core wounds that made those parts develop in the first place. Now, that deeper level of reprocessing trauma is best done in the container of a therapeutic relationship, but a lot of it we can learn over time to do on our own. And the best beginning place is to simply start to recognize in our relationships, if you're kind of constantly doing something that your partner says, this is not working for me, or you hear the same feedback from friends, it's really probably a part that needs your time, attention, presence, and love. And you'll know it. You'll know it from the pattern that you hear about, or you'll know it in your body. If you have some awareness of, I do that thing in the moment that feels right, but then I look back on it and I think, why did I do that? That wasn't very helpful, or I did that thing again, or I don't know how to not shut down when my partner is mad at me. That is a part that we can stop, we can pause, and we can learn to do a whole dialogue process with so that we can understand it. And when parts feel understood, they then have the option to give us access to material that could be healed, and or sometimes even without that step, they begin to realize they have the freedom to act in different roles now because they've learned they're no longer the age, we are no longer the age at which they developed. They're no longer, they don't need to think you're 4 years old and everyone hates your project and therefore you can, or your picture, your painting, therefore you should never draw again, or you should never engage in art or creativity, because that's like a really good example of a belief that a protector might develop at a really young age that then keeps us from this whole life of exploring what we love and expressing ourselves. I have a part that when I was 11, was making outfits kind of like this. And I was chopping up clothes and putting like green tights on white button-down shirts. And I wore bright red lipstick. And I'd have one big earring and one small earring because I always loved asymmetry. Should probably start doing that again on this channel. And I was made fun of that, by my mom. And she would tell me, oh, the kids are going to laugh at you if you wear that. And I didn't completely put it away, but there have been times on and off in my life where I put my personal self-expression, which is always so important to me from a really young age, away so that I could protect myself from that perceived rejection. And honestly, being laughed at by peers is probably less painful than being laughed at by your mom, which is essentially, what she was communicating. And I know that her protector was the one that stepped in and told me that because she wanted to keep me from the feelings of shame and humiliation that she probably had not processed. And that's another reason we can't afford to not understand IFS if you are a parent. We will unknowingly transfer those protectors' kind of irrational beliefs that are based on just making sure we belong to the group or we belong to someone in front of our authenticity. And so my whole work and my belief in what psychospiritual healing really is and why it's my greatest passion is that we can understand how to work with these parts with love, curiosity, compassion, understanding, so that we can reveal the truest essence of who we are. And that's our greatest gift in the world. Goodness knows with what's happening out there right now, I'm making this in the fall of 2025, we need more love-filled, grounded, authentic people who are letting their freak flag fly. And for me, it's wearing sequins in my videos because I have a billion of them and I love them. For me, it's overdressing when I go to my dance classes. I do line dancing during the week, at a bar with my friends. And I love being the most overdressed person. Not always, but often, or wearing this to the grocery store, like that's who I am. Now, that's not every day, but that's something that's, a protective part could keep me from expressing and has in the past. And I will not let that happen. And internal family systems, inner child work, all this whole field has been so pivotal for me, giving myself permission to be authentic in the world, including this channel that I'm so excited to be back at, making videos for, that I cannot recommend this process more. I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep making videos about it. I would love for you to ask me questions about internal family systems. I'm going to talk about what it looks like in daily life in the next video. But truly know that all those protectors have the ability to move into preferred roles that they'd rather be doing instead of keeping us from the fullness of who we are, that they'd rather be doing instead of getting mad or criticizing our partner or getting defensive. They really, truly, once they learn that we grew up and we have our capital S self, our higher self, to provide all that love, all that approval, all the time, energy, and presence that maybe we didn't get, or our parents just couldn't get. I know I've been so busy as a parent. I have been misattuned to my kids, I'm sure, many times when they were little. They're grown now. And we talk about that. But, you know, it's an opportunity for us to reparent ourselves that then lets the highest version of us show up in loving partnership or in our close relationships or even with difficult people at work or just in the world. When we can access self energy, we're much less likely to start a war or be violent or, you know, cut someone off in traffic even. So it all begins with us understanding our own internal family system. Can't wait to talk more about this. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate when you subscribe, hit that button, and share with someone that you think would appreciate this content. Oh, I have a free PDF parts guide that hopefully will be on my website by the time this gets published. Knock on wood. If it's not, stay tuned. Keep checking my website and it'll be there soon. Or I'll link it to this video as it's available. Until next time, may you be happy. May you be healthy, may you be safe, and may you be at peace. Bye for now.